Clayton Ridge had been down on his luck before, but never quite like this. The dust on his boots was older than the mule he rode in on, and the mule was ornery enough to buck him off 3 times that morning. Still, Clayton pushed forward, following the trail into Lakota territory, because he'd heard rumors, whispers, of a horse so fast it could outrun storms and jump rivers in a single bound, a horse named Thunderfoot. Clayton didn't have much, but he had determination and exactly $12 tucked into his vest pocket. He prayed it would be enough for at least a chance to negotiate. When he reached the encampment, the first thing he noticed was the silence. Not an eerie kind, but the respectful quiet of a place that lived in harmony with the wind. The second thing he noticed was Chief Gray Bear, seated near the central fire, his expression unreadable beneath the lines of age and wisdom. Clayton approached carefully, hat in hand, heart pounding like a drum. "I came to buy a horse," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "I heard you own Thunderfoot." The chief studied him for a long moment. Clayton felt as though the man was looking straight through him, past the dust and sweat and desperation, down into the marrow of his intentions. Finally, Gray Bear nodded for a young warrior to bring the horse forward. Thunderfoot emerged like a living legend, muscles rippling, dark coat shining like a midnight river. Clayton's breath caught. It was like staring at a creature born from stories rather than flesh. $12, Clayton said, forcing the words out before he lost his nerve. "It's all I got, but I'm honest, and I'll work off whatever debt remains." The chief didn't speak. He reached out, took the small wad of bills, weighed them in his hand, then tucked them into his belt. Clayton blinked, stunned. That acceptance had been too easy. Nothing in life ever came that easy. Before he could ask whether some misunderstanding had occurred, Gray Bear lifted his hand and called out in Lakota. 2 figures stepped forward, young women, sisters by the resemblance between them. One walked with the confidence of a storm rolling across open land. The other moved with soft, quiet grace. Clayton's heart sank into his boots. The chief gestured to the women. "My daughters, they go with you." Clayton stammered, confused, overwhelmed. He only wanted the horse, but in the span of a heartbeat, he realized this wasn't just a purchase. It was a responsibility, a test, and perhaps a destiny he had unknowingly stepped right into. Storm in the west and quiet. Dawn rode on either side of Clayton, as if they had known him for years, though he could hardly make sense of their presence. Storm carried herself with a warrior's posture, chin high, eyes always sweeping the horizon. Her braids swung with each step of her horse, and she kept a bow across her lap as naturally as breathing. Quiet Dawn, in contrast, sat lightly in her saddle, hands folded gently around the reins, her gaze drifting to birds, river currents, and the color of the evening sky. When she looked at Clayton, it was never with suspicion, only curiosity, like she was trying to read the story written behind his eyes. Clayton kept clearing his throat, hoping one of them would explain things without him having to ask again. But they remained focused on the trail. Finally, he couldn't take the silence any longer. "You sure your pa meant for you two to come with me?" he asked. "I ain't trying to cause trouble." Storm didn't even glance at him. "We know what our father meant." "That's what worries me," Clayton muttered. Quiet Dawn offered a small smile, but the kind that didn't quite answer anything. "Our father has dreams, visions. He sees things others do not." Clayton raised a brow. "And what did he see about me?" Storm stiffened slightly, as though she didn't want to repeat it. "He said a stranger would cross our path. A man searching for something he does not understand. A man the spirits have chosen to test." Clayton let out a dry laugh, wishing it didn't sound as nervous as it felt. "Well, I'm just looking to make an honest living. Ain't no spirits getting involved with me." Quiet Dawn tilted her head. "Sometimes the spirits choose a person long before he notices." Clayton wasn't sure how a man was supposed to respond to something like that, so he focused on Thunderfoot trotting behind them, the great stallion's ears flicking at every sound. At least the horse made sense, strong, fast, valuable. The sisters, not so much. As the day stretched on, Storm continued to lead the way through narrow canyons and open plains with unwavering confidence. Quiet Dawn hummed softly under her breath. melodies that blended with wind and bird song. Clayton rode between them, feeling oddly protected and oddly judged, like he'd stepped into a story already in progress. That night, as they set camp beneath a sky dusted with stars, Clayton overheard the sisters speaking in low tones. Though he couldn't make out every word, he caught enough to send a chill through him. "If he is the one Father saw," Dawn whispered, "then danger will find us soon." Clayton lay awake long after, wondering what kind of man the chief believed him to be and whether he could ever live up to it. The morning had started peacefully enough, with sunlight spilling over the red canyon and a cool wind curling through the narrow pass. Clayton had been admiring the layered red cliffs when Thunderfoot suddenly snorted and tossed his head. Before Clayton could react, a rifle cracked through the stillness. The bullet struck the stone inches from his hand, sending shards flying. Instinct yanked him off his saddle and down behind a boulder. Storm had an arrow drawn before her boots even touched the ground. "We're under attack," she barked, her voice echoing between the canyon walls. Quiet Dawn grabbed Clayton by the collar and pulled him flat just as a second shot whistled past. Clayton's heart thundered louder than Thunderfoot's hooves. "Who in blazes?" "Bandits," Storm snapped. "The horse thieves." Clayton risked a glance around the rock and his stomach dropped. A dozen men were scattering across the high ridges, rifles gleaming. At their center stood Silas Crane, a man whose reputation stretched across 3 territories, leader of a gang that stole horses, cattle, and anything else that wasn't nailed down. Silas tipped his hat mockingly when he saw Clayton peek. "Afternoon," Silas shouted. "We'll be taking that stallion now." Clayton ducked back. "They want Thunderfoot," he said, breathless. Storm loosed an arrow, striking a bandit who tumbled from the ridge. "Of course they want Thunderfoot," she snapped. "Every outlaw from here to Kansas wants him." Quiet Dawn placed a calming hand on Thunderfoot's neck, whispering something soft in Lakota. The stallion settled slightly, but his muscles trembled with fear and readiness. Bullets tore into the rocks around them, turning the canyon into a storm of dust. Storm fired arrow after arrow, but the bandits kept advancing, climbing lower, moving in like wolves. Her quiver was thinning fast. "We can't stay pinned here," Clayton said, gripping his rifle though his hands shook. He'd been in shootouts before, but nothing like this, nothing where the odds were so steep. Storm snarled. "Then we move. You take Dawn and the stallion." "I'll cover." "No." Dawn's voice was calm but firm. "We stay together." Clayton swallowed hard. He knew then that the chief hadn't sent his daughters for tradition or ceremony. He'd sent them because he knew the danger that surrounded Thunderfoot, and now surrounded Clayton himself. A bullet clipped the edge of Clayton's hat, spinning it off his head. Something flared hot inside him. Fear, yes, but something stronger too. A determination he didn't know he had. He rose to his knees, braced his rifle, and took aim. If the spirits truly were testing him, then he'd meet the test head-on. He fired the first shot of his life that felt like destiny.